Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Ashleigh Early.
And I'm Sunanda Nair.
And I'm super excited because we are talking today with Tim Banks. Tim is the principal cloud economist at the Duckbill Group. And this is a little bit unusual because for the first time ever, we're actually interviewing an actual coworker. So I recently joined Duckbill Group as head of sales, and I was introduced to Tim on a group call, one of our company meetings, when Tim deployed a fantastic glittery fan in the middle of the meeting in response to some good news that we had for the company. And it just gave me the biggest smile. And I was like, yes, I need to be friends with this person. And as I got to know Tim, I realized he's been kind of in and out of the sales world, especially on the sales engineering side. So given the fabulousness that is everything Tim and us and our desire to make sure we're representing all types of sales, not just the actual closers, but RevOps, sales engineers, enablement, anyone who's in a revenue focused role, I just knew we had to get Tim on. So Tim, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Ashleigh, and Sunanda, I'm happy to be here.
So why don't you just give us a quick, like for our audience who probably isn't familiar with you because you live over kind of in the AWS world, tell us a little bit about kind of what your sales journey has been like, a little bit about kind of what we need to know about Tim.
Sure. So it's interesting because I am by trade systems engineer, systems architect. I spent a lot of time doing operations and frontline engineering for SaaS and database as a service companies, building automation, building DevOps pipelines, and doing site reliability engineering. But starting when I worked with a company called Object Rocket, I started being pulled into pre-sales meetings because we understood the kind of like the underlying technology behind what we were trying to sell at a time when a lot of people didn't. We were doing at the time NoSQL databases, and it was a great buzzword, but a lot of folks didn't have the actual understanding of what it did and what you could do with it. So I was brought into these meetings. Fortunately, that I get a lot of my ability to talk to people, especially to talk about sales, from my dad, who was a banker and owned a mortgage finance company and sold cars, right? So could literally sell. He could sell, like ice water to an Eskimo. It was just fantastic watching him do this. Even now, like if you talk to him, you're gonna walk away from him with a lighter wallet. But so I was able to talk to people, whether they were, engineers, whether they were finance folks, whether they were, C-level execs that weren't necessarily technical, but wanted to know kind of what the business cases for things were. And I was able to take that understanding of their concerns back to developing products, right? So I would, it was a two-way conversation, especially when sales we didn't make. When people said no, that was to me way more important than when they said yes. And so I began worked booths at conventions and stuff like that, and just became really comfortable with talking to folks. And so when you have, a good engineering background and you know how to talk to folks, salespeople just want you on the calls. So I got brought in on calls, whether I was an engineer, whether I was a TAM. And then finally I became my solutions architect with Equinix, principal solutions architect with Equinix Metal, which is my first actual designated, pre-sales role. And then now here at the Duckbill Group, I do a lot of the pre-sales as a principal cloud economist, because I can answer a lot of the more technical questions, and I can give a good yay or nay on whether something's going to be worth pursuing or not.
That's super interesting. Thank you, Tim, for that. I often find that what do they say? What are they saying now? Like, and it's true that every company is a technology company now. And so people with, your background who have the ability to understand the tech and be able to communicate that internally and externally is super relevant. And I was going to ask you what caused you to go from purely technical to dip into, the more sales or client side of it. And you answered that though. So,
well, it's interesting too, because more than just like, that I was good at it, I really got over having a pager. When you do frontline engineering, especially for production companies where nines matter, it's really hard to take time off, like really hard to take time off. And, it's really hard to have boundaries. And even if hey, okay, I'm on call this week. Well, sure. But, I've had companies where I would get 1,200 pages in a week. 1,200 pages in a week is a lot of pages. I got called into a Sev 1 call from the delivery room for my youngest child being born because something had gone down and the person who was on call was unreachable. So like those are the things that I didn't want to do anymore as a frontline engineer. So that was also a lot of the motivation for me moving away from those kinds of roles.
Is that availability something that's glorified on the engineering side? Because we see a lot of people posting about hustle culture, and like I'm never going to forget one of my first SKOs I ever went to. The CEO brought someone from legal up on stage, I think it was, and shared the story about how this woman was so instrumental in getting a deal done that apparently she was hiding in the bathroom and like reviewing things on her phone because she didn't want her husband to know she was working or something. And I just remember hearing that in the moment and going, why are we glorifying this? Like,
Yeah.
why can't she just take the time off, enjoy her husband? Why is she having to hide that she's working over the holidays on this thing? Like,
I mean, yeah, it's toxic as fuck if we're being honest, right? So
yeah.
that toxicity manifests itself in different ways, right? From the founder, from the leadership, the ones who stand to make the most of it, they will absolutely glorify that. And they will incentivize it, and they'll set up an environment that makes it conducive to not having those kinds of boundaries, right? Um, Sales folks are incentivized to sell a lot because of metrics. You wave a lot of money at them and say you sell, 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 sell. Well, that's what they're going to do. Like what you measure, right, is what you're going to do. And so the problem that creates is things get literally thrown over the fence. As long as you sell it, it's great. Yeah, everyone makes money, but then the people who have to catch it when it gets lobbed over the fence are operations folks like me when I was in there. So we have to make the thing work, or we have to keep it up and running, so that you can keep those contracts. And oftentimes, especially if your application or infrastructural architecture isn't where it should be, or you've got load-bearing technical debt, you make up for that in engineering hours, right? And it's a lot cheaper to just, pay engineers decently well, okay, and then expect them to work 80 hours a week than it is actually go through and hire enough engineers to properly staff what you're doing and then actually go fix the problem. And so it's kind of like it's almost like an austerity thing where it's like, well, we want to operate as leanly as possible, so we look good on the numbers, so more folks will invest in us and everything like that. But when you peel back the curtain there, it's not great, and you see a lot of burnout both in development cycles, but product folks who are doing development and the operations folks who are keeping it afloat. The sales hustle culture, it does the same thing. We need these numbers, we're going to put financial incentives on you to get these numbers, and folks are going to really go above and beyond in a very unhealthy way to get those numbers because they want to get those sales, they want to get this promotion, they want to get this, they want to get that. And that whole carrot and the stick notion behind hustle culture, I think is the worst that the tech industry has to offer.
I agree. Yeah, I think you said that perfectly. I'm curious, like I come from a sales background in enterprise AE, and like often, I don't know with sales engineers, or technical folks, who end up on the sales side, how I'm curious to hear your experience, as a person of color. I know for me that's been something that I feel like I've had to prove myself extra, right, on the sales floor. But I'm curious how that's played out for you in your career, particularly like having paired with sales and folks like that as well.
So earlier on in my career, and when I started, I'm fairly long in the tooth. So when I started in tech, we were prepping for Y2K, right? So we were still where most people still had dial-up modems, and we were still connected by we were still using like Banyan Vines, like Novell networks and stuff like that. Yeah, one of my first jobs we were prepping AS400 based manufacturing systems for Y2K by reprogramming them using punch cards. So but
They were still using
time,
punch cards in 1999.
oh yeah,
For
We're still using punch
AS400s,
cards.
the
Still using punch.
IBM.
Yeah. They're still using AS400 right now.
Yep.
We didn't learn nothing.
There's probably, yeah, there's definitely some elements of the government, probably the IRS that run on those still.
Oh, no. I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about large financial institutions,
Yeah.
large manufacturing institutions. There is a Fortune 50 music recording studio, right? Large music recording studio that has a lot of artists that if you can name anybody that probably either are recording for them or recorded for them, that their entire financial system runs on an AS400.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Having worked at
Yeah.
IBM, I remember the sales folks who are still renewing those deals for all that.
I will go so far as to say that the entire reason that IBM still exists is because of the AS400.
I actually don't know if I would argue with that at all. I haven't been there for 2 years.
But yeah, so starting back then, right? You didn't have a lot of Black people. I mean, yeah, you had a lot of folks from South Asia came in because it was, whether it was for they came in for school, they were hired for visas and stuff like that. They were usually in that time of day, because they were so starved for technical talent to prep for Y2K, it was super easy to get the visas and get people over here. So the bulk of the people that I knew that were people of color were South Asia or Asian, right? And so that's what you saw more of as far as your experience with people of color. So that's kind of what was the majority minority in the workplace. So you'd seen that kind of just being, not what the culture was, but they had their own kind of subculture. They hung out with each other. They had support with one another, right? If you were Black in tech in the 90s, there was maybe one of you or maybe two of you, right? And it was really difficult because the late 90s was still that was when I think IBM still had the suit and tie rule, and like EDS had just relaxed it to be business casual, but it was still a very homogenous culture, right?
My dad was at Oracle in this time period in the Bay Area, and I have vivid memories of going and doing Take Your Daughter to Work Day at Redwood Shores in I think I was there 90s, I think I did 96, 97, 98 were the 3 years I went. And it was suit and ties.
Y'all don't see me here. I'm clutching my heart. She's 97, 98. But so that was what the culture was. Diversity was not a thing back then, right? It was assimilation. And so that's why, a lot of Black folk that was in the industry back then, right? We code switch really, really, really well, right? So much so that I have to be pretty relaxed, pretty comfortable, and maybe inebriated for me to code switch back to how I normally talk. So it is
explain code switching for people who aren't familiar with that.
All right. So this is this is how I talk, like for real. So if I'm not in a professional setting like that, I talk like a Black kid from Southern Virginia, right? And when I'm around my people, we talk like that. What is called now, AAVE, African American Vernacular English, right? Is how I normally talk. But we have business talk or code, what they call code switching, where I switch to a much more anglicized kind of, homogenous, for lack of a better term, white manner of speech, which is considered business professional, right? I remember when y'all was controversial to say in a business environment. It's not now, and I will y'all the hell out of folks, right? Y'allers,
Y'all is an effective gender neutral group term that should be used more often.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But so you couldn't do that back then. If you want to get taken seriously, they were like, professional, act professionally, look professional, whatever it was. Like I had at that time, I had started growing my hair out because I was in the Marine Corps before that and I didn't have hair. So I started growing it out. I started to grow dreadlocks, and, I had to kind of keep it very, very kind of hidden, kind of up against my head or whatever, until I started working and doing tech in academia at a HBCU, and I could have my dreadlocks because I was around my people. Right. And so, but it was really, really hard, really hard. And that was the first time that I was a coworker of mine was a trans woman and was going through her transition. And I just remember watching how difficult that was for her, not just the actual transition itself, which is not easy, but the social aspect of it. And, just people being just fucking cruel, and it was hard. It was sad to watch. Like, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be respectful. I'm trying to understand this because I'd never known anyone who had transitioned to that point, and, being very respectful and trying to support how I could and ask how I could. But it was just so hard to see. It's so hard to watch. And so a lot of folks there's definitely a survivorship bias in our industry. Right. And that's why there's not a lot of Black folks that are senior in the industry, because a lot of us didn't make it. Right. That's why there's not a lot of women who are senior in industries like that, unless, in general, like at all, but especially Black women, or women of color, because why would you want to stay in that environment? Like, it's hard. It sucked. No matter how much they paid you. Right. It just sucked. And so, like, making it through that, and I burned out and left the industry for a few years. I became a chef. And then came back in 2008, after the recession hit then. But I was fully prepared just to say bye to tech because it was toxic as fuck. Still is in a lot of ways, but it was bad. It was bad back then. So, and we've come a long way. Don't get me wrong. We've come a long way, but that doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go yet.
I hear this story of burnout a lot. In my brain, I've also at some point been like, should I step away? And I'm curious, because you took some time off, what was the catalyst, or some of the reasons why you decided to come back?
Money. Literally the only reason why I decided to come back. 2008 recession hit. I was a chef. A lot of people didn't want to go and pay, $50 a plate anymore in 2008. So yeah, I came back for money. Money is 98% of the reason why I am still in the industry now, right? If I could make this money teaching jujitsu, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, I don't know, Ashleigh, if you've heard this, but I've heard some people give feedback in tech around, oh, money shouldn't be the motivator. And as a person of color, I was raised in this country, but I wasn't born here, right? Like, to me, that is a motivator. And some people just say things like, oh, well, that shouldn't be your motivator. And I'm like, it should be to be the best in your industry. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, I don't have all the, the money is important to me. I mean,
no, and that's such a great dichotomy too for a lot of salespeople. And for those of you who are listening to this, Tim has broken out a fan that says shade on it, and it is amazing because that is such it. But this is something I think it's unique to sales specific too, is you have this weird dichotomy of a lot of companies who think it is completely acceptable to hire salespeople who are not motivated by money, but yet pay them in such a way that the money has to be motivating to them. So they're looking for people who are coin operated, but believe in the mission and the values of the company. And so will work twice as hard, even though they're not necessarily going to get paid twice as much. It's a very weird mix. And there's such a thing as being, Wolf of Wall Street is a classic parable of being motivated by money for all the wrong reasons, and versus being motivated by money as a tool to build the life you want to live. It's interesting, I had an aha moment earlier this year, which wasn't really that much of an aha moment, but it was it had never clicked in my brain like this. When you work a blue collar job, the company is renting your body. When you work a white collar job, the company is renting your mind.
Literally,
right?
You sign something at these tech companies that if you come up with something, they own it, right?
Own it, literally. I'm not gonna joke, and this is true story. I actually have, for every SDR job that I have had, I've actually gone in and specifically added clauses in my employment contracts because I always had side gigs and stuff like that. And as a musician, I always had musician gigs, and those clauses would have technically entitled them to my music. And so I always had to go in and be like, nope, you can have anything that I do that has anything to do with this, or putting in exclusions for other things. So also read your contracts, people, and make sure you add those things, because I have heard of people getting slapped on the wrist and stuff like that for weird things. I know of one person who actually did get sued for something completely irrelevant just because the company was going under and looking for money. People are strange, but this whole idea of being like coin operated, money operated, like there's a way to do it and be healthy, and there's a way to do it that is toxic. And it really comes down to understanding whether or not the company defines money as a tool. If the company if the company does not define money as a tool, it's going to be toxic.
Here's what I'll say about the folks who say that you shouldn't do stuff, or you shouldn't be doing this job for money. Ain't one of those people running a fucking charity, right? All the people that you see, almost across the board, people you say that they're C-level execs, right? Or they're founders, or they start to do it. So none of those people are running a nonprofit. They are working for money. They don't want you working for money because they don't want to have to pay you for the work you're doing. They want to convince you to work real hard for not a lot of money because of the passion or because of blah, blah, blah. Well, that's great. And people can do that. Like if you love what you do, that's fine, but you should not. And as long as we're doing a capitalism, right, you should not be giving any of these founders a break on what they're going to pay you because they're trying to get rich off of your work, not their work. Elon Musk has not built a single Tesla. Elon Musk has not built a single rocket, right?
Elon Musk is a Bond villain.
Yeah, but damn if he won't connive and convince and cajole people to working for him for way less than they should, especially in the conditions that they do, right? And they're following the Jeff Bezos model.
Yeah.
It was following the model of every industrialist back until the Kings,
right.
Basically.
And so I'm not going to come here and I'm not going to drag capitalism because capitalism is self-dragging, right? I'm just going to say is that anyone who tells you that you should not be working for money is lying to you because they are themselves are working for money, right? We're not in an industry where you can just follow your passions and expect to get paid and have pay be a side effect. Now, especially as a person of color, like the people who are saying that usually went to college, usually they got money, usually they grew up in a house in a nice neighborhood. They got, no one who ever says that is poor.
No one who ever said that ever has to deal with food insecurity or physical safety issues, period.
Right. And almost always they have generational wealth, right? Yeah. Black people in this country were not allowed to accumulate generational wealth until very simply. Now, there was no law that says, well, you can't accumulate generational wealth, but they would sure take it away from us or make sure we didn't have it. Right.
There were institutional roadblocks that made it incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. And so I am like so just so we all understand, right? My father, who is still alive right now, was not able to drink out of any water fountain he wanted to until almost the time he left for the Vietnam War. Right. And so keeping in mind that generation is still here and that wasn't that long ago. Right. To tell people now in this day and age who are Black or who are other people of color say, well, you should be working for money. No, fuck you. Right. I'm working for money and I'm trying to have what you have. Right. So now that I'm trying to have what you have and I'm making my way to get it, don't sit there and tell me I should be working for money because your parents did.
So I got to ask, so if you're in, so kind of two situations in which I can see a comment like that coming up. Comment like that could come up in a job interview. Comment like that comes up in the job interview. What do you do?
Leave.
Run. Scream. Run.
I will literally, and I've actually done it before. I've just said, okay, thanks, and gotten up from the interview and left.
I had someone once in an interview tell me that there were real family atmosphere at work, and that means that there's a lot of nights and weekends. And I was like, great, I really appreciate that. That's not for me. Thanks. And they're like, what, you don't believe in working hard? I'm like, no, I do, but I will put in my 40 hours and I will leave because you're not paying me enough to put in 50, 60 hours a week.
Yeah, it's interesting because sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ashleigh. I feel like I hear this from particularly my friends. I'm half Indian, half Filipina, and so definitely I see a lot of South Asians on the engineering side. But one thing I've noticed between some of my peers, and this is my personal experience is, I have friends who are putting in 100+ hours at jobs, and I'm like, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? And they're like, well, it's the only way to to advance, right? And then I asked, my friends, my colleagues who are, white, and they were like, oh, maybe I put 50 in. And I'm like, this is such a big disparity on how they feel they can move forward with the amount of time they put in, right? And I used to do that, right? I used to put in like way too many hours. And I think that I don't know what happened, but one day I was just like, why am I giving people all of my time without something in return? And I think it's a hard thing for someone to navigate, particularly when you feel like you're already sort of at a disadvantage for whatever reason, right? And there's a myriad of reasons. So
this still goes back to essentially what is metrics driven behavior, right? We're going to put these goals in. We're going to put if they're sales goals, if they're growth goals or whatever, and then we're going to expect you to meet them. And if you meet them, great, you'll be rewarded. And if you don't meet them, you're going to be fired, right? And for me, the notion of I am going to affect your livelihood based on meeting a goal, which I know is going to require you to work in excess of 40 hours, right, is horrifying.
Yep.
Right. And, whether it's sales or whether it's whoever, right? Like when you make a goal, whether it's a sprint, whether it's roadmaps, whether it's operational goals, whether it's SLAs, whether it's your sales goals, you better make those goals so that they are attainable with 40 hours of work and time off. Not a quarter worth of work and never taking a day off. 40 hours of work, no more than 40 hours of work and time off, and understanding people have families, they got errands to run, they got medical appointments, they got all this other shit to do, right? And if you're not doing those, because the C-levels that you're talking to, they're taking vacation, right? And they're able to go to those appointments, they're able to do this and do that. They can go on talks, they can go, it's like that. That's great. I'm glad you can do that.
I heard someone justify this once as, oh, well, I hustled for 20 years. I'm allowed to take vacation now. I didn't take it for 20 years. And then I'm like, that's why you've been married 3 times. Good to know.
But even so, right? Here's the thing, right? Here's the thing, right? Just because like somebody had to endure suffering to get to where they are, does that mean that should be, you want that for everyone else?
No.
I don't want my kids to have to eat, fried bologna sandwiches. I mean, I had to at one point. I don't want them to have to. Just because I had to suffer, right, and go through some hard shit to get somewhere, doesn't mean I expect that for everyone else. It should not be the price for entry, right? Right. And the notion that others have to suffer because I did is extremely narcissistic and it's toxic as hell. And that, though, like, is the driver behind a lot of the hustle culture. It's like, yeah, I had to do this. And the environment that you had to do that in was so different back then than it is now anyways, right? You have like VCs like you have now. You didn't have the whole everything you had. Like it's a different, completely different world, right? And I feel like especially when we're talking about sales, right? The main driver that they give sales folks that I see in and of itself is rewarding behavior that's going to require those long hours. It's going to require either not necessarily unethical stuff, but certainly like, oh yeah, well, we can do that. Well, they can't do that, right? Or we don't actually have that feature, right? But I know I've actually watched it happen where someone sold stuff we didn't have, right? Or sold a feature that wasn't there yet, right? Or promised a level of service that we don't deliver. And then someone else has to go through and deliver that, right? And that was done so they can meet a goal. And then someone else has that goal to meet, right? And it goes and it becomes cyclical, right? The notion that you have to grow like this and grow like that. And a lot of that is the investment kind of aspect of it. Sure, I understand what the business needs are, but folks really kind of need to put the brakes on things, right? We've seen I don't know who remembers the .com bust, right? But we have a lot of folks that have been growth, and then eventually the growth stops, and then what happens?
I mentioned my dad was at Oracle. Guess when he left?
That's one.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little before, actually. I think it was like 99, but it was the beginning of the bubble. And it was I remember that vividly because it was exactly that. I watched It wasn't the first time it had happened, but I watched him get chewed up and spat out the moment it served the business. And it's so hard to remember until it happens to you or you see it happen to someone. Like it's so important to protect yourself the way the companies protect themselves.
Yeah. And especially for sales folks, it's very transactional, right? You're either winning or you're losing. And that's not really, like I said, that's not a great environment because that pressure is always, and if you meet your goals, you know what they do with your goals? They raise them, right? Almost exclusively. It's not like, okay, you've been good. Cool. You just keep hitting these goals. It's like, okay, hit this goal. Great. You can do this even more next
We're going to
time.
raise your quota 20%. Yay! Good for you.
Until it's going to reach a point where you can't do it. And I don't understand why. That's basic math. Like anybody who's ever done any capacity study means I can't keep increasing capacity. Capacity is finite for a human, right? And that is exactly how you burn people out or how you make people hustle and leave their, disregard their personal themselves first of all, and then their families and relationships, whatever else they go, because you say, okay, great, you make this, we're going to increase it. Now we're going to increase it again. Now we're going to increase it again. Right. Like what go ahead.
It's crazy to me too, because we know that it takes on average, when there's a rep turnover, it takes 6 months to get back up to full. If you're lucky, it takes an average of 6 months. So you keep increasing quota and quota and quota, or you do whatever, you expect productivity to keep going up. It is legitimately cheaper, according to basically every study that's ever been done, to actually have attainable goals and have people consistently hit between 90 and 110. It is absolutely cheaper to have it be fair and consistent than it is to have it be super spiky. Like, and it's ridiculous because we still have these adages, this general wisdom, these best practices with air quotes around, oh, hey, we know, like there was a study that was released recently. I forget where, I'll try and find it for the release notes, but like something like 30% of salespeople worldwide hit their quota regularly. 70% of us are missing in any given month. And that's just insane and toxic in the extreme. And you say it's black or white, it's hit or miss. It's not, it's shades of gray because things add up over time, but no one looks at it like that. There's a reckoning that is happening in quota and commission development. Companies are starting to see this. I've literally had companies bring me in and pay me to help them figure this stuff out. They're getting smarter about it, but it's going to take time, the same way it's taking, I'm drawing this comparison and I might regret it, but the same way it's taking time to shift adages around what skills are needed to be successful. I mean, it was standard practice up until 5 years ago, I think, to always require a college degree for a tech sales job. Yeah. It now is not. In fact, most places I know are dropping it because that's actually it's a not discriminatory, but it's a limiting hiring practice that inhibits diversity. And if you're inhibiting diversity at the bottom levels, you're screwed at the top levels.
It's non-inclusive.
It is not inclusive. It's exclusive. It's exclusive of economic diversity. It's exclusive of certain racial diversities, because we know that Asian males are most likely to have college degrees, followed by white males, followed by white women. Like we know all these things. So when you're requiring these things, like, oh, you're also excluding, like, oh, the military, you're excluding people who are re-entering the workforce. It's borderline ageist. It's ridiculous. But it's getting better.
I mean, but
it takes time for these old these old ways of thinking that we understand why they evolved that way, but it takes time for them just to freaking die.
Yeah.
I think I am something that never should have existed in the tech industry. If you follow the old adages,
you are a unicorn.
I'm a queer person of color with long hair, a beard, and tattoos, with no college degree, who is a principal engineer. Like, that's everything that's not supposed to be, like, according to ancient, what I'll call wisdom, right? But the notion, but like, as you've said before, like all these requirements, it's like it should be based on whether you can do the job or whether you can't, and you shouldn't just keep. People say, "Oh, we're going to raise the bar." I'm like, but you're not necessarily going to make people better by raising the bar. You're just going to make it easier to fail.
Yeah. I think there's something else in this background too, where you have most of the hiring. I mean, I think this is changing a little bit, not enough, but you have most of the hiring managers doing these interviews who have had very, similar backgrounds and have only been exposed to one sort of like their community, one community, and they don't know how to process information of something different, right? So you go into an interview and they're like, oh, I don't think they'd be a good fit because of X. I'm like, why do you think that? Right. And it's like, you now have to have these conversations where you're challenging people, but they're like, oh, well, I haven't heard that before. I'm like, so that's.
I literally in 2016, I literally had to have a conversation, and I can say that because I worked for 3 different companies in 2016. I had a conversation with someone about a candidate who someone else in the hiring panel wanted to DQ them because they kept saying ax instead of ask.
Even aside from saying I want to disqualify these people, is how the wheels are greased even for folks who are like them. Like, especially the higher you go in the role, right? If you're a white male and they're a white male, that blah blah blah, and then you get them in front of a panel that includes people of color and women, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't understand why they didn't work out. Well, we do. And so it's like that there needs to be that there really needs to be that kind of vetting, right? Where you're saying like when you're like your hiring panel should be inclusive in all ways, right? Your hiring process should be inclusive in all ways, not just the people on it, but the questions you ask, the ad, every aspect of it. You cannot let, if you've got white male leadership, that's great, but you can't have them making all the decisions for who you bring in, because who they bring in is almost invariably going to be more white males, right?
And that's and that can be despite their best efforts. It's this whole idea of, and not just unconscious bias, but you talk about success barriers and limiting factors and stuff like that. It's just, we all naturally group within our own community. So when leadership is grouped within one community, the referrals they're going to get, the people they're going to be comfortable with, even if they're trying to push out of their comfort zone, it's hard. I mean, as a cis straight white woman, like, I'm constantly really trying to make sure I'm aware, and I'm checking myself around all sorts of other axes to make sure I'm doing these things. But at the same time, not everyone knows to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird place to be in, and you can't immediately go to this place of anger or frustration or accusation. The intent can be there, but that doesn't mean you can take your foot off the gas and not have the hard conversations.
Yeah, our perceptions are obviously formed by our experiences, and I think that's what the important part is, right? So it's not just that I'm a queer Black man, right? It's that as a queer Black man, I have had a set of experiences, so I will look at answers differently, or I'll ask questions differently, right? And so when I ask you a question and it comes in a different way, and now I'm going to make you, as a person who has not had that set of experiences, now kind of think about things differently. And that's the true measure of someone, especially in a leadership position, is their ability to look at things differently, right? Listen to other perspectives other than their own, and then make a better informed decision, or at least a decision that has involved thought processes that are more encompassing and more inclusive, to say like, yeah, that's actually, now that I've considered these other things, this is the right decision to make.
It's diversity of thought and diversity as a culture add, not as a culture replicator, which we see. It's always like we see kind of with sales hiring. It's, let's go clone our top sales rep. No. That will work for 6 months and then blow up in your face.
I think it's interesting in the industry, in tech or in sales, right, that we've heard, I think things are shifting, right? At least somewhat on the level. Some of it I think is surface BS, to be honest. But I do want to hear, like, you've been in the industry for a long time. With some of the shifts you've seen, like, how, to me, they're trending, I think, in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work. But I'm curious what you've seen. Like, I wasn't working in the 90s, right? I know people who were, but I think that people are like, I get some feedback from close friends who are like, it's different kind of, but once you get to a certain level, it's not, right? And so I'm curious to hear what you think of that evolution.
I think that the pandemic has done more to change the face of sales than anything else in the past 20 years before that. Um, it used to be, you'd work regions, you work territories, you travel a lot, you go to here to here. There's a lot of in person and that type of, salesperson hustle, right? You're not doing that anymore, right? And it has done you approach how to sell differently, and what the lifestyle of a salesperson is now different. You can have a woman who's selling, who's got their kids there, the thing like that, because people now expect that, right? It's not something, oh, you got to hide the kids, you can't be a whole person because everyone is home with their kids, right? Now that's like, okay, well, cool. And so now you can manage that. It allows you to be, now, not every org is doing it right, for sure, but that ability to do that is becoming more common, right? And it's the opposite. What happened when the pandemic happens, people were having to make the choice between working and taking care of their kids because their kids were home. Now more kids are back in school, but so many women left the industry because of that choice, because the sales orgs were not taking care of those women. It was a fucking shame, right? Because you should be able to accommodate these people that are working for you, making your money, to be whole, inclusive people, and not just say, oh, well, your partner can work and you don't have to work. I've talked to people who've had to make that choice, and it's fucking stupid, right? It is the dumbest thing to do, because we're all sitting here talking on a camera. I can have my kids running here, right? And I'm not going to apologize for the kids. I'm not expecting you to apologize for kids. We got to pause. Hey, hold on one second. Let me go do this. That's fine. We're not emergency room doctors. None of what we are doing here is actually making that much of a difference. So to the level where a few seconds of a meeting or a minute's worth of meeting are going to matter because someone has to take care of a child, or we have to slide a meeting 15 minutes so you can go take care of something, right? And that is the problem that we had before, where people were so self-aggrandized about what they were doing, like it were making it so important because they would get so much money for it. It's not really that fucking important, right? None of us are curing cancer right now, right? The people that I know personally that I worked with in previous jobs that are actually like finding cures for the vaccine, they went home and slept at night, right? They took care of their kids. They could do that work. So what you're doing, the ability for people to see that people are whole people, for you to manage your life, your actual life, while you're working, and kind of in your work, you're integrating work into your life instead of trying to squeeze in life around your work, is what's making the biggest difference. And I think you're going to see more and more of that.
Could not agree more. Tim, this has been so much fun. Thank you for bringing all the candor and all the perspective. I really appreciate it. We're going to end this the same way we end every episode of Other Side of Sales, with our lightning round. So a series of rapid fire questions. Don't think too much about it. It's going to be fun. Start off, and I know a little bit about this, so this is going to be fun. Tell us about your morning routine.
I wake up at 6 a.m. on the first alarm beat, and then I shower and change, and I go and teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Pick one person who's had a significant impact on your career.
Oh man, I can't think too hard. Josh Lowe.
There we go. All right. What's your pump up song?
My pump up song is literally anything by Journey.
Okay, pick one.
Okay, it's gonna be Separate Ways.
That's my favorite Journey song. Sorry, everyone always goes for Don't Stop Believing. I'm sorry, Separate Ways, Worlds Apart is
Way better.
freaking
Way
brilliant.
better.
And also the most 80s music video I've ever seen. It's like
Oh,
literally
yeah,
a girl. It's like literally a girl walking on a pier with air guitars. It's hysterical.
Yeah.
It's great.
What's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier?
Boundaries.
Amen.
That's a lot in one word. All right. What book has been the biggest help to you in your career?
Dune.
Second time we've gotten out on this show. It makes me very happy.
What's one way someone could have been a better ally to you?
Oh, it's so, man, I'm trying to do this quickly because there's a whole lot of tea in this one, but I will simply say, right, a person who is a person of color, who is a manager, isn't always, a person of color, or acting or viewing things as a person of color, right? They have different experiences, but they're also going to cater to where the money is.
What's one way you're working to be a better ally for others?
I am listening more, and I am doing better to empathize with people as I listen to them.
What's your guilty pleasure after a long day?
Oh man, I guess is this mostly European crowd?
No, mostly American.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I'm gonna say it's usually Jack Herrera or strawberry lemonade vaped.
There we go. Awesome. All right, Tim, thank you so much again. Where can people find you?
People can find me typically on Twitter, shit posting at Elchefe, ELCHEFE on Twitter.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. It's especially helpful if you hit subscribe or if you can leave a review, especially on your podcast catcher of choice. That really helps us show up in the rankings or whatever all the algorithms go. You can always tweet us. We are on Twitter at @OS_pod, Instagram on at other side sales, and on LinkedIn at Other Side of Sales. Please make sure to share this episode with your friends if you found it was fun. And we will talk to you guys next week on another episode of The Other Side of Sales.